Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Welcome to everyone. Glad you're here tonight for session 4 of our Creation Care 101 class. We're going to be talking about purchasing and consumption tonight. It's a little bit different than some of our previous sessions, as there is no Creation Care Collective video, but we have several resource videos that they sent out with some discussion questions so that we can think about consumption patterns and how that affects creation and some of the choices that we make in our lives. So let's go ahead and we'll start with a word of prayer and then jump right in. Let us pray. Oh God, you have created such a beautiful creation, and we are grateful for this time to pause, reflect, and then act on behalf of all that you have made. We pray that this video series can bring great insight and commitment for all of us to explore ways that we can better steward all that you have made. Thank you for those who are able to be a part of this, and pray your blessings upon the ministries of each of these congregations and individuals. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so the first video that we're going to watch, oh good, Cindy's here. Hi, Cindy. So Lisa and Cindy, you have met, right? On this, have you met on this video series before? Well, let's just go ahead and just say a name, your name, where you're from, and any kind of reflections on the series so far. I'll start. I'm Noni Strand. I am in Olathe, Kansas, which is a suburb of Kansas City, a member of Overland Park Lutheran Church. And I've been very pleased with how this has engaged different people and additional people in the Synod. And it seems to work well to have a video recording so that people can participate even if they can't meet on the night that we are together. So Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Provence. I'm also a member of Overland Park Lutheran Church. This is something I feel very passionate about, and it melds well with other groups I belong to, such as the Missouri Master Naturalists and the Sierra Club. So I get a little bit of information from them as well. So hopefully I can share some of what I learn here with them there as well.
Oh, Cindy, you're muted.
Sorry, I was on WebEx the last hour, so now things are in different places again. Cindy Gross, I'm the chair of my green team at Bethel Lutheran here in St. Louis, Missouri. And I'm also a member of the Sierra Club and some other groups, but
Great.
This just seems to have a positive focus and new areas to think about. So it's good.
Great. Well, I was telling Lisa that our format's a little bit different tonight. We don't have the Creation Care Collaborative video like we've had, but we do have resource videos that they have sent. So it'll be good for us for some conversation and discussion about purchasing and consumption to help us think about those things. So the first video we're going to see is from the Story of Stuff. It gives us an introduction to the production cycle and the effects of consumption on climate change and environmental justice issues. It is a little bit outdated because it was made in 2007, and that you'll notice some of the things they mention seem kind of a little bit old. So like she has an iPod, and we don't use iPods so much, but it does have really good information, and I think it helps us to think about this well. So we'll start with this. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we can begin. Can you hear it? Okay.
of these? I got a little obsessed with mine. In fact, I got a little obsessed with all my stuff. Have you ever wondered where all the stuff we buy comes from and where it goes when we throw it out? I couldn't stop wondering about that, so I looked it up. And what the textbook said is that stuff moves through a system from extraction to production to distribution to consumption to disposal. All together, it's called the materials economy. Well, I looked into it a little bit more. In fact, I spent 10 years traveling the world, tracking where our stuff comes from and where it goes. And you know what I found out? That is not the whole story. There is a lot missing from this explanation. For one thing, this system looks like it's fine. No problem. But the truth is, it's a system in crisis. And the reason it's a system in crisis is it's a linear system and we live on a finite planet. And you cannot run a linear system on a finite planet indefinitely. Every step along the way, this system is interacting with the real world. In real life, it's not happening on a blank white page. It's interacting with societies, cultures, economies, the environment. And all along the way, it's bumping up against limits. Limits we don't see here because the diagram is incomplete. So let's go back through. Let's fill in some of the blanks and see what's missing. Well, one of the most important things that's missing is people. Yes, people. People live and work all along this system. And some people in this system matter a little more than others. Some have a little more say. Who are they? Well, let's start with the government. Now, my friends tell me I should use a tank to symbolize the government, and that's true in many countries and increasingly in our own. After all, more than 50% of our federal tax money is now going to the military. But I'm using a person to symbolize the government because I hold true to the vision and values the government should be of the people, by the people, for the people. It's the government's job to watch out for us, to take care of us. That's their job. Then along came the corporation. Now, the reason the corporation looks bigger than the government is that the corporation is bigger than the government. Of the 100 largest economies on Earth now, 51 are corporations. And as the corporation has grown in size and power, we've seen a little change in the government where they're a little more concerned in making sure everything's working out for those guys than for us. Okay, so let's see what else is missing from this picture. We'll start with extraction, which is a fancy word for natural resource exploitation, which is a fancy word for trashing the planet. What this looks like is we chop down the trees, we blow up mountains to get the metals inside, we use up all the water, and we wipe out the animals. So here we are running up against our first limit. We are running out of resources. We are using too much stuff. Now, I know this can be hard to hear, but it's the truth, so we've got to deal with it. In the past 3 decades alone, 1/3 of the planet's natural resource space has been consumed. Gone. We are cutting and mining and hauling and trashing the place so fast that we're undermining the planet's very ability for people to live here. Where I live, in the United States, we have less than 4% of our original forests left. 40% of the waterways have become undrinkable. And our problem is not just that we're using too much stuff, but we're using more than our share. We have 5% of the world's population, but we're using 30% of the world's resources and creating 30% of the world's waste. If everybody consumed at US rates, we would need 3 to 5 planets. And you know what? We've only got 1. So my country's response to this limitation is simply to go take somebody else's. This is the third world, which some would say is another word for our stuff that somehow got on somebody else's land. So what does that look like? The same thing, trashing the place. 75% of global fisheries now are fished at or beyond capacity. 80% of the planet's original forests are gone. In the Amazon alone, we're losing 2,000 trees a minute. That is 7 football fields a minute. And what about the people who live here? Well, according to these guys, they don't own these resources, even if they've been living there for generations. They don't own the means of production, and they're not buying a lot of stuff. And in this system, if you don't own or buy a lot of stuff, you don't have value. So next, the materials move to production. And what happens there is we use energy to mix toxic chemicals in with the natural resources to make toxic contaminated products. There are over 100,000 synthetic chemicals in use in commerce today. Only a handful of them have even been tested for health impacts, and none have been tested for synergistic health impacts. That means when they interact with all the other chemicals we're exposed to every day. So we don't know the full impact on health and the environment of all these toxic chemicals, but we do know one thing. Toxics in, toxics out. As long as we keep putting toxics into our industrial production systems, we're going to keep getting toxics in the stuff that we bring into our homes and workplaces and schools, and our bodies. Like BFRs, brominated flame retardants, they're a chemical that make things more fireproof, but they are super toxic. They're a neurotoxin. That means toxic to the brain. What are we even doing using a chemical like this? Yet we put it in our computers, our appliances, couches, mattresses, even some pillows. In fact, we take our pillows, we douse them in a neurotoxin, then we bring them home and put our heads on them for 8 hours a night to sleep. Now, I don't know, but it seems to me in this country with so much potential, we could think of a better way to stop our heads from catching on fire at night. Now, these toxics build up the food chain and concentrate in our bodies. Do you know what is the food at the top of the food chain with the highest level of many toxic contaminants? Human breast milk. That means that we've reached a point where the smallest members of our societies, our babies, are getting the highest lifetime dose of toxic chemicals from breastfeeding from their mothers. Is that not an incredible violation? Breastfeeding must be the most fundamental human act of nurturing. It should be sacred and safe. Now, breastfeeding is still best, and mothers should definitely keep breastfeeding, but we should protect it. They should protect it. I thought they were looking out for us. And of course, the people who bear the biggest brunt of these toxic chemicals are the factory workers, many of whom are women of reproductive age. They're working with reproductive toxins, carcinogens, and more. Now I ask you, what kind of woman of reproductive age would work in a job exposed to reproductive toxins except for a woman with no other option? And that's one of the beauties of this system. The erosion of local environments and economies here ensures a constant supply of people with no other option. Globally, 200,000 people a day are moving from environments that have sustained them for generations into cities, many to live in slums, looking for work, no matter how toxic that work may be. So you see, it's not just resources that are wasted along this system, but people too. Whole communities get wasted. Yep, toxics in, toxics out. A lot of the toxics leave the factories in products, but even more leave as byproducts or pollution. And it's a lot of pollution. In the U.S., our industry admits to releasing over 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year. And it's probably a lot more because that's only what they admit. So that's another limit because yuck, who wants to look at and smell 4 billion pounds of toxic chemicals a year? So what do? Move the dirty factories overseas, pollute someone else's land. But surprise, a lot of that pollution is coming right back at us, carried by wind currents. So what happens after all these natural resources are turned into products? Well, it moves here for distribution. Now, distribution means selling all the toxic contaminated junk as quickly as possible. The goal here is to keep the prices down, keep the people buying, and keep the inventory moving. How do they keep the prices down? Well, they don't pay the store workers very much, and they skimp on health insurance every time they can. It's all about externalizing the costs. What that means is that the real costs of making stuff aren't captured in the price. In other words, we aren't paying for the stuff we buy. I was thinking about this the other day. I was walking to work and I wanted to listen to the news, so I popped into a Radio Shack to buy a radio. I found this cute little green radio for $4.99. I was standing there in line to buy this thing and I was thinking, how could $4.99 possibly capture the cost of making this radio and getting it into my hands? The metal was probably mined in South Africa. The petroleum was probably drilled in Iraq. The plastics were probably produced in China. And maybe the whole thing was assembled by some 15-year-old in a maquiladora in Mexico. $4.99 wouldn't even pay the rent for the shelf space it occupied until I came along, let alone part of the staff guy's salary who helped me pick it out, or the multiple ocean cruises and truck rides pieces of this radio went on. That's how I realized I didn't pay for the radio. So who did pay? Well, these people paid with the loss of their natural resource space. These people paid with the loss of their clean air, with increasing asthma and cancer rates. Kids in the Congo paid with their future. 30% of the kids in part of the Congo have dropped out of school to mine coltan, a metal we need for our cheap and disposable electronics. These people even paid by having to cover their own health insurance. All along this system, people pitched in so I could get this radio for $4.99. And none of these contributions are recorded in any accounts book. That's what I mean by the company owners externalize the true costs of production. And that brings us to the golden arrow of consumption. This is the heart of the system, the engine that drives it. It is so important that protecting this arrow has become the top priority for both of these guys. That's why after 9/11, when our country was in shock, and President Bush could have suggested any number of appropriate things, to grieve, to pray, to hope. No, he said to shop, to shop. We have become a nation of consumers. Our primary identity has become that of being consumers, not mothers, teachers, farmers, but consumers. The primary way that our value is measured and demonstrated is by how much we contribute to this arrow, how much we consume. And do we? We shop and shop and shop, keep the materials flowing, and flow they do. Guess what percentage of total materials flow through this system is still in product or use 6 months after their date of sale in North America? 50%? 20? No, 1%. 1. In other words, 99% of the stuff we harvest, mine, process, transport, 99% of the stuff we run through this system is trashed within 6 months. Now, how can we run a planet with that level of materials throughput? It wasn't always like this. The average US person now consumes twice as much as they did 50 years ago. Ask your grandma. In her day, stewardship and resourcefulness and thrift were valued. So how did this happen? Well, it didn't just happen. It was designed. Shortly after World War II, these guys were figuring out how to ramp up the economy. Retailing analyst Victor Lebow articulated the solution that's become the norm for the whole system. He said, our enormously productive economy demands that we make consumption our way of life, that we convert the buying and use of goods into rituals, that we seek our spiritual satisfaction, our ego satisfaction in consumption. We need things consumed, burned up, replaced, and discarded at an ever-accelerating rate. President Eisenhower's Council of Economic Advisors chairman said that the American economy's ultimate purpose is to produce more consumer goods. More consumer goods? Our ultimate purpose? Not provide health care or education or safe transportation or sustainability or justice? Consumer goods? How did they get us to jump on board this program so enthusiastically? Well, two of their most effective strategies are planned obsolescence and perceived obsolescence. Planned obsolescence is another word for designed for the dump. It means they actually make stuff to be useless as quickly as possible, so we'll chuck it and buy a new one. It's obvious with things like plastic bags and coffee cups, but now it's even big stuff. Mops, DVDs, cameras, barbecues even, everything. Even computers. Have you noticed that when you buy a computer now, the technology is changing so fast that in just a couple of years, it's actually an impediment to communication? I was curious about this, so I opened up a big desktop computer to see what was inside. And I found out that the piece that changes each year is just a tiny little piece in the corner. But you can't just change that one piece because each new version is a different shape. So you gotta chuck the whole thing and buy a new one. So I was reading industrial design journals from the 1950s when planned obsolescence was really catching on. These designers are so open about it. They actually discuss how fast can they make stuff break that still leaves the consumer having enough faith in the product to go out and buy another one. It was so intentional. But stuff cannot break fast enough to keep this arrow afloat. So there's also perceived obsolescence. Now, perceived obsolescence convinces us to throw away stuff that is still perfectly useful. How do they do that? Well, they change the way the stuff looks. So if you bought your stuff a couple of years ago, everyone can tell that you haven't contributed to this arrow recently. And since the way we demonstrate our value is contributing to this arrow, it can be embarrassing. Like, I've had the same fat white computer monitor on my desk for 5 years. My coworker just got a new computer. She has a flat, shiny, sleek monitor. It matches her computer, it matches her phone, even her pen stand. She looks like she's driving in Spaceship Central, and I look like I've got a washing machine on my desk. Fashion is another prime example of this. Have you ever wondered why women's shoe heels go from fat one year to skinny the next to fat to skinny? It's not because there's some debate about which heel structure is the most healthy for women's feet. It's because wearing fat heels in a skinny heel year shows everybody that you haven't contributed to that arrow as recently, so you're not as valuable as that person in skinny heels next to you, or more likely in some ad. It's to keep us buying new shoes. Advertisements and media in general plays a big role in this. Each of us in the US is targeted with over 3,000 advertisements a day. We see more advertisements in 1 year than people 50 years ago saw in a lifetime. And if you think about it, what's the point of an ad except to make us unhappy with what we have? So 3,000 times a day, we're told our hair is wrong, our skin is wrong, our clothes are wrong, our furniture is wrong, our car is wrong. We are wrong, but it can all be made right if we just go shopping. Media also helps by hiding all of this and all of this. So the only part of the materials economy we see is the shopping. The extraction, production, and disposal all happens outside of our field of vision. So in the US, we have more stuff than ever before, but polls show that our national happiness is actually declining. Our national happiness peaked in the 1950s, the same time that this consumption mania exploded. Interesting coincidence. I think I know why. We have more stuff, but we have less time for the things that really make us happy. Friends, family, leisure time. We're working harder than ever. Some analysts say we have less leisure time than any time since feudal society. And do you know what the two main activities are that we do with the scant leisure time we have? Watch TV and shop. In the US, we spend 3 to 4 times as many hours shopping as our counterparts in Europe do. So we're in this ridiculous situation where we go to work, maybe 2 jobs even, and we come home and we're exhausted. So we plop down on our new couch and watch TV, and the commercials tell us you suck. So you got to go to the mall to buy something to feel better, and then you got to go to work more to pay for the stuff you just bought. So you come home and you're more tired, so you sit down and you watch more TV, and it tells you to go to the mall again. And we're on this crazy work, watch, spend treadmill, and we could just stop. So in the end, what happens to all the stuff we buy anyway? At this rate of consumption, it can't fit into our houses, even though the average house size has doubled in this country since the 1970s. It all goes out in the garbage. And that brings us to disposal. This is the part of the materials economy we all know the most because we have to haul the junk out to the curb ourselves. Each of us in the United States makes 4.5 pounds of garbage a day. That's twice what we each made 30 years ago. All of this garbage either gets dumped in a landfill, which is just a big hole in the ground, or if you're really unlucky, first it's burned in an incinerator and then dumped in the landfill. Either way, they both pollute the air, land, water, and don't forget, change the climate. Incineration is really bad. Remember those toxics back in the production stage? Well, burning the garbage releases the toxics up into the air. Even worse, it makes new super toxics, like dioxin. Dioxin is the most toxic man-made substance known to science, and incinerators are the #1 source of dioxin. That means that we could stop the #1 source of the most toxic man-made substance known just by stopping burning the trash. We could stop it today. Now, some companies don't want to deal with building landfills and incinerators here, so they just export the disposal too. What about recycling? Does recycling help? Yes, recycling helps. Recycling reduces the garbage at this end, and it reduces the pressure to mine and harvest new stuff at this end. Yes, 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 we should all recycle, but recycling is not enough. Recycling will never be enough for a couple reasons. First, the waste coming out of our houses is just the tip of the iceberg. For every 1 garbage can of waste you put out on the curb, 70 garbage cans of waste were made upstream just to make the junk in that 1 garbage can you put out on the curb. So even if we could recycle 100% of the waste coming out of our households, it doesn't get to the core of the problems. Also, much of the garbage can't be recycled, either because it contains too many toxics or it's designed not to be recyclable in the first place. Like those juice packs, where they have layers of metal and paper and plastic all smushed together, you can never separate those for true recycling. So you see, it is a system in crisis. All along the way, we're bumping up against limits. From changing climate to declining happiness, it's just not working. But the good thing about such an all-pervasive problem is there are so many points of intervention. There are people working here on saving forests, here on clean production, labor rights, fair trade, conscious consuming, blocking landfills and incinerators, and very importantly, taking back our government, so that it really is by the people, for the people. All of this work is critically important, but things really start moving when we see the connections, when we see the big picture. When people all along this system get united, we can reclaim and transform this whole linear system into something new, a system that doesn't waste resources or people. You see, what we really need to chuck is that old school throwaway mindset. There's a new school of thinking about this stuff, and it's based on sustainability and equity. Things like green chemistry, zero waste, closed loop production, renewable energy, local living economies. It's already started. Some say it's unrealistic, too idealistic that it can't happen. I say the ones who are unrealistic are those who think that we can continue with the old way. They're dreaming. Remember, that old way didn't just happen. It wasn't like gravity that we just have to live with. People created it, and we're people too. So let's create something new. There's a lot of information on this website about groups doing incredible work. Click around, get involved.
Okay. So there was quite a bit of information on that one. So I thought we'd just have a few questions. Again, this is old, so some of the statistics might not be exactly accurate, but I do think that it's helpful to think about that production cycle and where we fit into that. So just as you reflect on that video, what struck you, or maybe what was new or something you hadn't heard about before?
Well, it's horrifically depressing.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, the stuff about, consuming like that, it didn't really start getting pushed till after World War II or the 50s, and
Yeah.
telling us like that that this is your purpose. It's like, what? And the whole idea of this planned obsolescence or perceived. I mean, the perceived, you can just see that in so many places.
Oh, yeah. You've got to have the newest phone, and you've got to have the everything. Yeah.
It's designed to become obsolete because, like my iPad I'm doing this on, I used to get movie channels like Disney and Star, to be specific, but now their last updated software, this iPad it cannot do that. And I thought, they want me to pay them for this service, but now they're telling me I have to buy a newer iPad to do it. And I'm like, well, I'm just going to need to cancel the service. It's like, no, I mean, they try in every angle to force you to get the update, just like cell phones. What was that 5G thing? My son and I both had to get new cell phones because they would no longer work on this with the carrier we had.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very frustrating. And even if you try not to consume, there are things that it makes it very difficult, like you say, because they plan for it so you can't do it, or you can't get the parts anymore. Or we have a light, this is just a small thing, but we have a light fixture in our kitchen that we can't buy light bulbs, that we can't buy LED light bulbs for anymore because it's the old click-in kind rather than the screw-in kind. So we're going to have to replace the light fixture. There's nothing wrong with it. I mean, we don't care, but I can't get light bulbs. Yeah.
And I'm concerned about, like, my daughter rehabs houses, and all the new light fixtures are LED lights, but you can't replace the bulbs. So they last a long time, but when they go, you have to replace the whole thing.
Yeah. So what do we do as as people of faith? What might we be able to do about this?
Well, I think there's a whole wave of people that call themselves minimalists, I think it is, where, you got 4 plates and 4 cups and 4 spoons and whatever for your whole family, and that's it. That's like one extreme, because I look at that and I'm like, oh, I'm only running the dishwasher once a week. I need more than 4 spoons. But so there's that might help, to be more minimal, to buy secondhand.
Yeah.
We kind of my family's kind of started doing like Christmas, we haven't made it mandatory, but we're leaning more. Gifts have to be secondhand, whether you're buying them at the thrift store or you're finding them in the house.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I have this book I'll put it on the resource list because I think it's backwards, but it's called Simpler Living, Compassionate Life, A Christian Perspective. And it's a number of different authors that write about a more simpler lifestyle and the choices that we make. So it's not only about consumption, but it talks about time and kind of our values. It also has a study guide for groups and individuals. So it's, I think part of what we have to do too is to educate ourselves and educate our congregations that it's so easy to just get sucked into that mindset. I mean, if you think about, we always want the stock market to go up. We want, everything to continue to grow, where we can't sustain that. With the earth can't sustain all of that. So it's how do we re-educate ourselves to think about success, to think about values in a very different way. And we're better to do that than in the church. So I think that's one of the values of being in a congregation is there's a group of people that we can influence. I was
Well, and
reading, go
both
ahead.
the extraction of natural resources that happened at the beginning and the production where she was talking about using energy to mix toxic chemicals to create toxic products. It's like, yeah, so if you're focusing on caring for the earth, you might want to change those practices,
Yeah.
that we can't take everything. Just like
Right.
she said, we're running into limits, and you have to
Mhm.
recognize that there are limits, and
Mhm.
that if you're putting garbage in, you're going to get garbage out. And that's,
Yeah.
mean, it's so distressing. You
Yeah.
see some of these things and it's like, yeah, we've poisoned ourselves.
Yeah.
So,
And it's the other thing that I always found very interesting is the whole idea about externalized costs. When she talked about the $4.99 radio, there are so many costs that we don't pay for, but that are paid for by someone else. And that really gets into some of the justice issues. And if we had to really pay for everything that we consumed, we might consume a lot less because
Right.
it would,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's
Grocery,
yeah.
Well,
the grocery
yeah,
store a big spot for that, because I don't want to support factory farming, but they'll have this, chicken sale or pork chop sale or whatever, and it's like,
right.
oh gosh, or do I buy it from the small farm where it costs me twice as much? But what I have found, paying that extra, you don't waste that stuff.
That's true.
We're much
That's
more
true.
conscious about eating what's in the refrigerator and not letting that last pork chop spoil
Right.
or what.
Right.
Mhm.
Well, and the more we buy from those farmers, that empowers them so that they can continue to do what they do and bring costs down. But it's these, and when we deal with systemic issues like this, it's very difficult because we are one piece of a very large system. And that, I think, becomes very difficult and overwhelming. And don't worry, I'm not going to leave you in depression. I do end with hope tonight, but it is, I think it's very important that we understand the depth of the issue and kind of the challenges and get people riled up.
I did sent a video today through the Naturalist, but it was from the Nature Conservatory, I think is what they're called.
Nature Conservancy. Yeah, Nature Conservancy.
Yes, thank you. It was talking about, I believe it was called the Emerald Coast, which is Alaska through Canada, all the way down to Oregon. And it was using it as an example of how indigenous people's practices, how that area, because it's been managed by indigenous communities, how much healthier it is. The tree, the water, the animals, the everything. And I thought, and how much carbon it's sequestering and all this. And I'm like, Well, there's a light. Let's look at this beautiful strip of the coast that's doing quite well. Sometimes you got to offset all the bad news with
Right,
something that's working out.
right. One of the books that I've read that I found to be very hopeful, it's the sequel to the Project Drawdown book. It's called Regeneration. And it's a wonderful book that talks about solutions. And at every chapter, it gives examples of people who are doing it. And these are the things you don't hear about on the news, but it's like there are so many smart people, so many committed people across the globe that are really digging in and taking charge. And I like to think about all these congregations in our synod who are doing their part. Those are hopeful signs. These are the signs of hope, and we've got to connect together and work together so that we can make really positive change. Because our synod is a system, and as we can gather more people into that action, we can make significant change. We can advocate on the political sphere. We're consumers, so we have a voice. So there's a lot we can do when we work together. Okay, anything else? I'm gonna keep moving on. We have another video. This one is about plastic, which let me see if whoops. This is a little bit depressing too, but it also, what I like about it is she talks about solutions and things to think about when we are coming up with solutions. So I'll play this. It's about 4 minutes long.
Plastic pollution is one of the most talked about environmental problems. It seems like every day I hear about some new idea that could magically solve things, like vacuum cleaners that suck the plastic off the ocean floor, or bacteria that can digest it. And while those make for really exciting headlines, they're also wildly unrealistic. Even beach cleanups, or making toothbrushes out of old bottles, these don't address the real problem. We just make too much plastic. We went from producing 2 million tons in 1950 to 368 million in 2019, and the industry is planning on tripling production by 2050. So how do we identify the solutions that can get to the root of the problem? There are 3 questions we can ask ourselves. Number 1, does the solution reduce plastic production? We're talking big picture, systemic change. A real solution has to work towards ending our dependence on plastic, period. Imagine the plastic crisis as an overflowing bathtub. A false solution is like bailing it out 1 spoonful at a time. It's never gonna work no matter how hard we try. A real solution would be turning off the water. So first we've got to look to the source of plastic, which, if you didn't already know, is actually petroleum. Plastic is now responsible for 4.5% of global greenhouse gas emissions, which is more than all of the world's airplanes combined. So when we're fighting to end fossil fuel extraction, we're not only pushing climate action, but also making it harder for big polluters to drown us in cheap plastic. Or what about discouraging companies from making plastic by forcing them to clean up the pollution their products cause? Or better yet, encouraging refill systems that enable companies to reuse their packaging. These types of things already exist. An example I like to use is this one in Oregon, where a bunch of breweries work together to take back and reuse their bottles instead of making new ones. A real solution aims to redesign the throwaway culture that created the plastic crisis in the first place and reduce the amount of plastic we produce overall. That's why reduce comes before recycling in the 3 Rs. Number 2, will this solution benefit both people and the planet? Plastic pollution obviously affects more than just wildlife. People are harmed all along the plastic supply chain too, like those who live near polluting petrochemical facilities, or people whose livelihoods, like fishermen, are being destroyed by waste. So when we're looking at a proposed solution, we should ask ourselves, does it give power back to the people and communities most impacted by pollution? Will it provide good jobs with fair wages and safe working conditions? For example, the global recycling system is highly dependent on waste pickers, people who collect, sort, and process plastics. Waste pickers, especially in the global south, are often working over toxic fires all day long for little pay and without protective equipment. So in order for recycling to be ethical, Waste pickers have to have a seat at the decision-making table, and workers' rights and protections at the forefront of the conversation. Which brings me to my third question. Is the solution accessible? A lot of solutions sound good on paper, but aren't actually doable in the real world. In order for a new system to really work, it needs to be available to everyone. Real solutions benefit all people, regardless of where they live or how much money they have. If it's a new technology, can you scale it to reach more people? If it's a new product, will everyone be able to afford it? If we get creative enough, we can often find solutions that address the problem while saving money. An example I like to use is companies like this one, who found that selling cleaning products without any water significantly lowers their costs and cuts out the plastic bottle, allowing them to offer more affordable products that are also packaging free. Okay, so let's review. Real solutions: 1, go to the heart of the problem by reducing how much plastic we make in the first place. 2, they're better for people and the planet, ensuring that the rights of those most impacted by plastic pollution are prioritized. And 3, they're scalable and accessible, meaning most people can participate because they're cheaper and more widely available than the polluting alternative. The good news is, innovative solutions to environmental problems already exist. We're already seeing them in the real world, and it's helping us imagine what a more sustainable and equitable future can look like. It's gonna require all of us, but we can get there together.
So that one has a little bit of hope there. So here's the questions, which I thought was a helpful way to look at it is, does the solution get at the root cause? Will it benefit both people and planet? And is the solution accessible? So she talked about plastic in particular, but how might this address other issues that we deal with in our congregations? Like maybe it's about clean water or consumption or waste disposal or those kinds of things. It might be different in different parts of our synod. But how do you feel about those ways of looking at accessing solutions to some of the problems we've been discussing?
Well, I mean, it made a lot of sense when, you know, if you look at all three of those together.
Well, and it looks at more than just putting on a Band-Aid. It's at how do we really get at the problems that that really exist. And Lisa, you were talking about like Christmas gifts. I mean, what if we encouraged our congregations? I know there was the alternative Christmas idea years ago, you know, giving gift baskets with plastic-free alternatives so that we, you know, there's shampoo bars and they show the different cleaning tablets that you can use. And there's all kinds of laundry detergent that's no longer in plastic bottles. So just again, educating people and making it kind of fun. I mean, these are very serious issues, and if all we do is just look at the difficulties, it's so depressing. Nobody's going to want to do anything.
Well, yeah, you feel frozen.
Right.
Along the line of that, and I think I've got a few girlfriends as far as fashion, because fast fashion, I mean, everything's designed like the skinny heel, fat heel thing. I mean, that could be dishes, it could be anything. But my girlfriends have kind of, the competition is finding the coolest looking stuff that you bought secondhand or at the, you know, that, okay, we lovingly refer to it as dumpster diving, but that, you know, there's wood. Okay, here's a good example. Construction sites throw out so much wood.
Yeah.
So much. So there's a deck builder and regular peruse their dumpster with their permission. And I've used that to do for building supplies.
That's great.
So when you got it, like I said, if you make it fun, or like with us girls, it's kind of like a competition. Look what I got. I didn't pay anything for it, you know, whatever. So I used to love that when Overland Park used to do the big trash pickups, and everybody would drive around and pick up
Oh.
all the stuff. And by the time the trash company was supposed to come pick it up, most of it was gone. Somebody else
great.
started to recycle themselves or to use, or, you know, whatever. They don't do that anymore though, unfortunately. So
Mhm. And you might have seen there was a little, there was a little box that was on the video, and it refers to a movement called Buy Nothing. And these women put together this network where people kind of just come and trade their stuff. And I know there are lists on Facebook for different communities where you can give things and receive things. But, you know, especially as money gets tighter, these are really good ways. I know my sisters and I, we swap stuff all the time. I call my sister, you know, say, hey, do you have such and such? I don't want to buy it. And she says, sure, you can use mine or you can have mine. And I think the more we get to that point where we don't have to always buy new, it's just a different orientation to how we do things.
Yeah, my daughter-in-law is in one of those groups, and I mean, it's great because she finds shoes for her kids and, you
Yeah,
know, clothing that they don't wear that long,
yeah,
and, you know,
it becomes like treasure hunting.
yeah, toys or
Yeah.
high chairs. She can change out their toys so they don't get bored with things. They just swap around.
and then you don't accumulate all that stuff
Right.
and have it sitting around. Yeah, yeah. I think Jesus would have been big in a buy nothing thing, although Jesus probably didn't collect much stuff. You know, he didn't fill up his basement like we do. So,
And I have to buy a bigger and bigger house for all this stuff.
oh, I'm so guilty of that.
Storage
Yeah.
units. And that is such a profitable, you know, it's like, how much is your stuff that you're storing that you pay rent on every month? How much is it worth?
Yeah.
Especially after you've paid rent on the storage for years and years.
Yeah. It's just crazy. I mean, the way we think of how we think about it culturally is really nuts. We're really kind of nuts. Yeah. And it certainly isn't biblical. You know, it doesn't, I don't see that reflected in scripture. So, all right. Well, now we've tackled plastic pollution. Oh, goodness. Okay. The next one, this one is, this is a video series. This is just the fourth one. There's also a longer one, but it was kind of long for us tonight. But this one is done by a man named Nate Higgins, and I heard him speak a number of years ago and found him to be fascinating. He comes out of the financial world. He worked at Salomon Brothers and Lehman Brothers, and he just decided this is nuts. So he changed in 2003. He shifted his focus to understanding the relationships between energy, environment, and finance, and the implication this synthesis has for human futures. That's what his website says. But what I think is really helpful is that he helps us to think about this change that's coming. He calls it the great simplification, which I think is a good way to think about it, from a number of different lenses, that it's not going to be all technology or there's no magic bullet, but what are the different lenses through which we need to look? I think, now he doesn't have this, I don't think he's a particularly person of faith, but I think as people of faith, we have an important lens through which to see these things. And if I really get my courage up, I will write to him and tell him, you know, suggest that he include the faith perspective, because I think that's a really important part of this. But anyway, this is the fourth part of his 4-part video series, and I thought it was a really interesting voice to hear. I think we have to hear different voices and not just the same people or not just church people, because we need to be in conversation with people throughout society. So here is Nate Hagens.
We are alive at a time of wonder, peril, and possibility. Ahead are a million unknown destinations, some dark and foreboding, and some welcoming and beautiful. Many of us sense that something is different, something is coming, but we lack a shared understanding of the path that brought us here and of the terrain ahead. Which future we expect depends upon which lens we use to see the road. Modern society is polarized, stressed, and overwhelmed with information, good and bad. As a result, common points of view, our lenses, focus on the road just in front of us. For the view to the future, we defer to culturally accepted guides who are confident they know the way forward. Through the lens of an economist, for example, we see a glorious road leading to growth that never stops. Any scarcity of energy or material inputs will be solved by price signals, creating incentives which increase our productivity and growth. The economic lens shows us that human ingenuity and the market will solve everything. A financial lens translates stock markets at all-time highs as a sign of society's health, portending a rich and virtuous future. With enough financial capital, we'll be able to build roads to anywhere. A technology lens promises a shiny road of comfort, novelty, and prosperity, enabled by future inventions. Innovation, artificial intelligence, and a vibrant metaverse will sidestep any energy or resource constraints. We envision future humans breaking free from the confines of Earth and enjoying high-tech lifestyles where the biggest problem is runaway robots. These lenses are all optimistic, but misguided. All these lenses are energy blind. The real paths ahead can only be seen by integrating energy awareness with biology, sociology, physics, and everything science has discovered. We need a systems lens to read the map. A systems lens reveals the holistic story that explains humanity's path. In pursuit of the same emotional experiences of our ancient ancestors, we transform materials and energy into technologies that make our lives more comfortable and fun. We keep score of our progress using money, which has become a psychological stand-in for all the things our ancestors valued. The massive scale of humanity's consumption is evidenced by the excess CO2 being absorbed by Earth's oceans and atmosphere. The emergent result is a metabolic superorganism with oil as its hemoglobin, transporting goods through the arteries and veins of a global supply network. Like a shark needing to swim to get oxygen flowing through its gills, our current economic system has an imperative to grow in order to satisfy prior financial commitments. We can't stop, nor can we slow down, or the system will crash. A systems lens reveals that the road ahead is closed to our current cultural expectations, yet we continue to bear down on the accelerator. Wearing systems lenses removes the blind spots created by any single issue lens. Global economic growth will never meaningfully decouple from energy consumption. It cannot, because the world's GDP, by definition, has always been a proxy for how much energy we burn. If we were to grow the global economy at 3% a year, as most governments and institutions expect, we would use as much energy and materials in the next 30 years as we have in the past 10,000. Stock markets are poor guideposts for prosperity when inflated by government and central bank support. All the cash, stocks, bonds, and pension funds in the world will need energy and materials to be cashed out and turned into real wealth. Creativity and innovation will be central to human futures. But modern technology requires huge amounts of energy to build and to operate. As long as GDP is our goal, efficiency gains from new technology will serve the superorganism. Transitioning from fossil hydrocarbon to rebuildable energy won't change this dynamic. Ultimately, in addition to using different energy, we'll need to use energy differently. Seeing our future through a systems lens changes everything. We have spent the last century harnessing enormous amounts of fossil energy to build a world of complexity like nothing seen before. In the coming century, humanity will experience a great simplification. There will always be energy on Earth as long as the sun burns. But the amount of surplus energy available to human societies will soon be diminishing. As the extraction of geologically stored energy becomes more difficult, everything we're used to in society will become more costly or less available. We are not planning for this because it's never happened before. The onset of the Great Simplification will be financial and economic turbulence, followed by contraction. When we can no longer grow fast enough to maintain all the increased financial claims, economies will recede to a scale that can again be supported by physical flows without credit. Complex global supply chains, the related high consumption lifestyles, and many of the conveniences and freedoms we take for granted in this era of abundant energy surplus will diminish. The ensuing simplification will be among the most significant events ever experienced by our species. Those who look through a systems lens can serve as early visionaries of a simpler life, with new ways of relating to technology, to consumption, to each other, and to Earth's ecosystems. There are many pathways wending through a great simplification. Some are wise, humane, and even preferable to what we have now. Some are so dark as to be nearly unthinkable. Yet it is precisely thinking about these pathways and actively choosing among them which offers the only realistic hope for a long and meaningful human future. Nature has gifted us with a productive and beautiful home, the ability to understand how we got here, and the creativity to imagine which paths are possible. The future need not be dystopian, but cleverness alone will no longer suffice for the next leg of our journey. We will need imagination, foresight, empathy, and above all, wisdom to navigate the path to the future that is arriving. The Great Simplification.
Okay. So there's kind of a different way of looking at moving forward. I like what he said about the path forward is going to require empathy, foresight, and wisdom. And I thought, and faith. And I think that's what we in the church can offer to this. So how do you see this future described by Nate Hagens through the lens of faith? He talked about technology, finance, economics. What about through the lens of faith? I'll just throw this out for you to think about. I don't think we can just say, well, God's going to take care of it, so we'll just kind of take our hands off. I think this is a time that calls us to be agents of justice, and the Micah, to do justice and love kindness and to walk humbly with our God. This is a time for us to be people of action, especially on those who can't do it on their own behalf. And that's where I think we have such a voice in these choices that are made going forward, and why it's so important that our congregations be involved in this.
Yeah, at the end of the video that we watched in the drawdown session,
Uh-huh.
they were talking about at the end that basically we're called to make a choice. And the choice is, you know, do you remain the people that we currently are, or do you figure out, you know, dream about the people that we can be, and what future do you want to create?
Mm-hmm.
That's the hopeful
Right.
way you've got to move forward, you know, that there are things that we can change and things that we can do.
Mm-hmm. Has this whole idea of systems, is that something that's familiar to you, that you've thought about before? It's been mentioned in a couple of the videos. Is that something that resonates, that you can relate to, or is like, oh, I hadn't thought of that before?
I mean, I guess I think we have started to realize how interdependent
Right.
the entire system is, that,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
that people are part of creation, and if the earth isn't a healthy place, the animals and the people and the rest of us are not going to be healthy either.
Yeah. Yeah. And that interconnectedness is so, I think, so important as we think about moving forward and what we do. And that even, I mean, in a congregation is a system. If you think about, I'll just use an example. Changing a worship time.
Mhm.
I don't know if that was something that ever has happened in your congregation, but I have seen congregations literally, I mean, people just get all wound up. And so it's not just the worship committee making that decision, but they have to think about, okay, how's that going to impact? It's all interconnected, and it's interconnected with people's personal stuff too, as well. So nothing is ever simple. And I think that's important to think about when we work on any kind of creation care activities in our congregations, is that we might think, oh, this is just a simple change, and somebody else might be, whoa, this is crazy. We can't do that. You know, I'm so mad. So how we listen to one another and get people's input, and I think that's where it's helpful to have like a group. I'm glad you mentioned, Cindy, you're the chair of your green team. I know at Overland Park, we're trying to get some things going maybe. And so, you know, it's how do you engage people so that people have ownership and it's not just kind of imposed from above.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I told you I would give you some hope. So I'm going to show this next video is, this one comes from Lutherans Restoring Creation, and one of the board members put this together. So I will share this with you. It starts out a little grim, but it gets better.
Jesus said, "You will know the truth, and the truth will set you free." Well, here are the facts. These are true, and I don't feel free. I feel buried under facts. And while it is a fact that the world is getting dangerously hotter, that humans are to blame, and that we are running out of time, there is more to be said than can fit in the trend line of parts per million atmospheric analysis and the background extinction rate and congressional deadlocks and fossil fuel subsidies. The Earth is good. And it's not naive to believe that that fact matters just as much as the others. The Earth is good, and it is worth saving. It's worth serving. This world is worth serving. Isn't it worth believing in? Christians have a stubborn belief that the ultimate truth of the world is healing. That isn't a denial of death or woundedness. It's a refusal to let those facts crowd out the whole truth. The world in fear and despair and pain is in desperate need of faith, hope, and love. And so are we. These are gifts that God offers lavishly, foolishly, abundantly. We cannot do the work of serving this world if we are not rooting ourselves in the gifts that we need most of all. This is a call to everyone who feels buried alive under the weight of the climate disaster, who mourns what we have lost and fears what is to come. Do not do this alone. Faith, hope, and love are not luxuries. They are as essential as food and water and air. So come to the table, to the water, to the Spirit of the one who loves you. Receive the love that you hope to give, wounded hand to wounded heart. May God Creator bless you and keep you. Amen.
So what keeps you? I mean, we've talked about some pretty difficult stuff. What keeps you hopeful, committed, and continuing in this work?
The beauty of nature.
Yeah. Working with other people like you, Noni, like Lisa Brinskelly, like whoever was talking on that video, that was great.
Yeah. I'm going to keep that one and just watch it every day, I think.
Mhm.
I love, one of the lines I loved was, faith, hope, and love are not luxuries. I thought, oh, that is so true. We need that like we need food and air and water.
Yes.
And I do think that whole idea that we can't do it alone. One of the groups that keeps me just so committed and hopeful is our monthly call for our Lutherans Restoring Creation mission table. Because when we come together, we share these thoughts about what we're doing and what we're going to try to do. And it just keeps you going. And Lisa, you know, you've got your friends who are trying to outdo each other on their thrift store purchase. I mean, we've got to have that, or we couldn't keep going. So keep good care of your spirit.
That's a good, I mean, the whole faith, hope, and love, it says what keeps you hopeful, committed, and continuing this work. I mean, for me, it would be the love of nature and the Lord tells me to be a good steward of the earth. I mean, I feel very strongly. So that keeps me going. I'm supposed to be a good steward. That's my purpose.
Yep.
So.
Yep. That's good. That's good. Well, I'm going to just share a few things on our resources. I will be sending you a list of videos that not only the ones we watched tonight, but some other ones that the Creation Care Collective sent to us. I'll send you the information on this book, Simpler Living, Compassionate Life. And I'll send you this PowerPoint as well, because this has all the links and everything. I also wanted to just share briefly some of the things that we have on the Central State Synod website for Lutherans Restoring Creation. There's a lot of things that we've put together this year, especially because of the resolution that was put forward at the Synod Assembly and the memorial that we sent to Churchwide. So there are some great things for Lent. And if you have avenues to share this, either with your pastor or the worship committee or whoever's planning those things, there's a, I'll just go. There's a worship, they're pre-done. I mean, they're ready to go. So it's like ready-made worship services. So it's, you know, for pastors and worship committees, it's great. There's the idea of an environmental tithe, that how we save on energy and the other things that we do, how do we then use those funds for helping with creation care? So there's more about that in these resources. The bishop is going to do a weekly Bible study on Zoom with the social statement on creation. And that's open to anybody in the Synod. March 4th, we are going to do a retreat out at Hollis Renewal Center. And so Lisa, this is very accessible for you. And there's information on this website. We hope, I've already got a couple people coming from Kansas City. I've got a woman from Lindsborg who's coming. I think Cindy and a group might be coming from St. Louis. So there's overnight accommodations if people need that. There's more information. And then resources for congregations and individuals to reduce their carbon footprint. So practical ideas. And then for summer, there's a VBS curriculum that has been put together by one of our pastors. But let me just share this real quick. So this is the website. Here's the resources for Lent. And then there are links to devotional practices, commentary and theme, the Lenten season. Here's information on the retreat and the how to register. That's here on our website. Bible study, but all of those things can be found. It's linked to the Central States. We have our own little Squarespace because we have more things that we want to put on here. But this is, and you may have seen it when you were getting the videos for Creation Care 101, but just encourage you to use some of those resources that might be helpful in your congregation. Our next session is, the topic is regenerating soil, compost, and waste, and it's on Valentine's Day. Is that going to be a problem for anybody?
Probably not.
I don't think so.
Well, we can just spend all our love on creation. So
There you go.
I did get an email from the Creation Care Collective people that they're not going to continue doing the series in the same way that they've done it. But I would like to just have input from you if you want to go ahead and we can continue, and we can do kind of like tonight, and I could put some resources together if that would be helpful. I was very disappointed that they just kind of stopped. But
So they don't have the curriculum pre-recorded?
well, I asked him, that's one thing I did ask is, did they have, I think they've offered it before. And I said, can we get the videos from before and just use those? Because I said, it's been some new things that I haven't seen before, and it's been really helpful. And I know that people are using these things. So I haven't heard back from her. So maybe by the next time we meet, I'll have a little bit more information. But we'll go ahead and do soil, compost, and waste next week, and then see if I can get their recordings from them. Does that sound like an okay plan?
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you. Any other thoughts or ideas or questions for tonight, or? Well, let's close with a word of prayer. Oh God, at times it is overwhelming. And then we remember that you are the source of faith, hope, and love. You are our guide. You are the one who calls us and equips us for this work. And so we put our trust in you, oh God, and we draw our energy from you and from one another. As we leave tonight, we pray, oh God, that you give us a spirit of hope, the energy for the work that is before us, and the creativity to imagine along with you how beautiful this world is, and how worthy it is of the work to which you have called us. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen.